Hi everyone, I'm DeMarco Morgan. We're following breaking news right now out of North Korea. The country has carried out another missile test according to multiple Asia reports. They say it was fired east toward Japan, and both the American and South Korean militaries are analyzing the launch right now, which comes just hours after the country threatened to, quote, sink Japan and turn America into ashes and darkness. And of course, it has sort of wakened the nerves of many people who live in that area in the country. The Japanese government advised people to take cover in buildings or underground. And national public broadcaster NHK is reporting that the missile likely flew over Japan's Hokkaido region, I should say, but did not hit the country. So that is the good news. It did not hit any country and cause any damage that we know of at this hour. But again, both the South Korean and U.S. militaries are analyzing details of the launch. The fact that they are again telling their people there in Japan to take shelter, to take cover in buildings and underground, of course, is disturbing for many. And this is, according to this report here, the nuclear test. It's the North's sixth and its first since President Trump took office. Now, this has also spurred international condemnation and fresh, of course, there for the United Nations Security Council sanctions, many which have caused tons of debate when you talk about the sanctions, whether or not they were too harsh, trying to get other countries around the world to agree as well. And after our ambassador, Nikki Haley, basically tried to come to an agreement, they did come with some agreements for those sanctions there, and North Korea is still saying that they are pretty difficult. Of course, no country would probably agree with any sanctions that are being held against it. But North Korea again fired an unidentified missile eastward from the vicinity of Pyongyang this morning. That's according to South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff. Basically said that in a statement about a couple of minutes ago. So we're just now getting all of this information here. Also, an AP reporter in Seoul, South Korea, saying that the National Security Council is about to meet within the next 40 minutes. The military is already conducting its own missile drill there in the East Sea. So this is extremely serious and extremely dangerous, to say the least. But we do know, according to these reports that are coming out of Asia there, that the missile did not hit anything there in that country, did not hit anyone there in Japan. So again, the government just basically advising everyone to take cover in buildings or underground. This is most certainly a big deal there. North Korea did not give any warning to its neighbors before the launch, so that could cause a ton of problems for the relationships there. It actually launched at 6:50 a.m. local time there in Japan. So we are already into Friday there in that country, in that part of the world. So just watching this unfold now, it is breaking news here in our country, here in the U.S. Now, again, Friday's launch was the sixth time that a North Korean ballistic missile passed over Japan, with the last incident taking place back on August 29th. So Kim Jong-un, the leader there of North Korea, is not showing any signs of letting up, and that is sort of causing a blow to the nerves of many people, especially many countries who have concerns about those missiles, including the United States. We have yet to hear from President Trump now. We are waiting to see what the White House's reaction will be after learning of this. Isaac Stonefish, the senior fellow at the Asia Society's Center on U.S.-China Relations, joins me now by phone. Thanks a lot for joining us, Isaac.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so real quick, what do you make of this? This is pretty bold, again, to say the least. It's the sixth time.
This is pretty aggressive, and it also comes after really striking comments from Pyongyang about wanting to bury Japan with nuclear weapons. So I think earlier we just heard those comments seemed like more bluster, but to fire a missile over Japan after making those comments shows that North Korea is more serious about making this a message than we thought.
And of course, I know we always want to deal with negotiations and diplomacy in the best way. It appears that he doesn't want to talk. He doesn't want to deal with any of the other countries.
Well, I think this is a way that he is talking. He is communicating what North Korea's position is by firing missiles over other countries and keeping it, very much on the side of the line that will prevent war.
All right, so what do you make of the fact that the Japanese government has pretty much told people there to take cover in buildings and underground? This is serious.
It's serious, and Tokyo has to be very careful that they warn people so that in the case that the missile goes where it wasn't intended, because it's almost certainly intended not to hit any Japanese targets, but just to send a message, Tokyo wants to be able to say, yes, we warned you, we were prepared. It's a domestic political message there. I don't think, or I don't hope, rather, that this means that North Korea has changed its calculus and now wants to be a much more aggressive player. I hope that they are still just signaling, and from what we know now, that's what seems to be the case.
So, Isaac, at what point does it stop?
It's fascinating to look back at what happened in, say, 2010 when North Korea sunk a South Korean submarine, killing dozens of South Korean sailors, or in 2011 when they shelled a South Korean island and killed, I think, 4 people then. It's possible that things get worse than they are now, tensions raise, but both sides are able to come back from the brink of war. So I think it stops when, for some mystifying domestic and international political reason, Kim Jong-un decides that he wants to talk on a different level.
All right, and you touched on this a bit. The North's launch comes a day, of course, after the North threatened to sink Japan and reduce the U.S. to ashes and darkness for supporting that UN Security Council resolution imposing new sanctions against it for its September 3rd nuclear test. What do you see going forward when we talk about the UN sanctions? Will it get worse? Will it get harsher?
I think a lot depends on how much China wants to continue to be on board with North Korean sanctions. Obviously, they have a veto vote at the Security Council, and they are already sanctioning more than they're comfortable with. So I think a big question is how much China views North Korea's behavior as deserving more sanctions.
But how long can China wait before
China
they
can
have
wait
to react?
For decades. I mean, they are reacting in a lot of ways that we just don't see because it's done very quietly between the Chinese Communist Party and the Workers' Party of Korea. But I would be shocked if they are not privately, very, very sternly making their displeasure known in a way that's very harmful for North Korea's interests, but done much more subtly than public sanctions.
All right, so Isaac, you're the expert in this whole area, this field here, because you've studied it for years and years. Tell us, what's next? What's going to happen next, and what has to happen next?
Well, that's a really important question, and I wish I could predict what would happen next. North Korea is one of the world's most opaque nations, and it's so difficult to know. That said, I think what we'll do is, we'll see tensions continue to rise until either on the negative side, Trump or Kim Jong-un miscalculates and things descend into a shooting war, or until Kim Jong-un and Trump say, listen, we actually both have more to gain by increasing diplomacy and potentially eventually meeting. I think the bigger the problem that North Korea is, the more credit that Trump gets for solving it, and the more incentivized he is to have a summit. Same thing with Kim Jong-un. The worse the international environment is, the more popular he can be domestically. He says, listen, I found a solution. I've settled with, the American imperialist overlords, and I've brought peace to my people. So it could really go either way.
But you talked about it, and I just want to go back to this real quick, and then we'll let you go. You talked about how this is Kim Jong-un's way of sort of talking and his way of sort of determining diplomacy ahead. So are you saying that we will probably have to make the final decision going forward? Because if this is the only way that he's talking, apparently we're going to have to react, or somebody's going to have to react, be it China, be it Japan, somebody's going to end up reacting soon.
I don't think there needs to be a military response to North Korea. I think just because this is a language Kim Jong-un is deciding to use to communicate a lot of how he feels about the world doesn't mean we have to respond in kind. It doesn't mean that us responding in kind is the best policy. It's important to remember that on the one hand, the United States is far more powerful than North Korea is and poses a much greater threat to North Korea than they do to us. The other hand, we have to remember that North Korea has the ability to obliterate Seoul with conventional weaponry, not even nuclear weapons.
And I understand that we're
China,
more powerful, but I mean, you still can't underestimate another country who continues to fire missiles left and right.
Totally. And it's not about underestimating. It's about not living in fear and not allowing this to overshadow other more important problems we have both domestically and internationally. And it's realizing that North Korea says and has said for decades a lot of crazy things and rarely follows through on them. And also that it makes a lot more sense to believe that Kim Jong-un is rational and not suicidal, and that he doesn't want his reign to go down in a ring of fire from American missiles. You know, he wants to come out of this too. So I think everyone wants the same thing. The question is who's willing to blink first and give up more to get there.
And Isaac, I promise you this is my final question because you really are talking me through this and helping me out. Just in layman's terms, help me out with this. It's almost like you're living on a street and your neighbor keeps firing shots. Of course, I understand diplomacy. I understand the importance of trying to talk things out. But eventually, if your neighbor keeps firing shots in your direction, at some point, something's going to stick. How do you talk to somebody who's not willing to talk, and the only way that they're going to talk to you is through missiles?
I think the neighbor implies a bit too much equality. It's sort of like if you live in a really nice mansion and there's someone who lives in a hovel next door and is horrific to his children, but also could do damage to you if you kind of went in there and tried to change things. You got to figure out a way to speak to him on his level and kind of communicate in a way that he understands. And that doesn't mean that you're going to be awful to your own people, again, extending this neighbor metaphor, or that you're going to go in and use the kind of violence that he does. But you have to realize that sometimes people just don't move, and you're going to have to figure out a way to live with them, because evicting them or obliterating their house is worse for both of you.
All right, thank you. You are the expert, Isaac Stonefish. Before you go, real quick, how do you pronounce this region? Is it Hokkaido?
Hokkaido, yes.
Hokkaido. Okay, thank you very much. We appreciate you, and thank you so much for your time.